I will call to order the meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. We were down last week, but certainly not working. We are whole new world here this last week. Good morning, Mr. Mokrzycki. We will start off by seeing if there are any adjustments to today's agenda. Seeing none. Any emergency business this morning?
No.
Then we will move right into public comment as our first item. We have a few people signed up here in person in Harris Hall, and we will take folks in the order that they signed up here in Harris Hall first, and then we'll move to see if there's anyone online wishing to speak. We give folks 3 minutes for public comment, and I will call you to the podium. When you get to the podium, please state your name for the record, and then keep an eye on the clock on the wall for your time. And I will also let the person who is next know so they can be prepared. So first up this morning is John Helmer, and he will be followed by Charlotte Helmer. And welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Real pleasure to be here. I'm John F. Helmer, live at 33925 CV Loop in Commissioner Lovell's district. And in the winter, I work at the Egan Center in Springfield. I come with really two messages. One is thanks for what went well, and the other is a call to action to fix what needs improvement. In terms of what went well, I think it's too easy to forget to thank the doctors and the nurses and the first responders, all the volunteers and staff of the nonprofits and many others, the utility workers who looked after each other, even neighbors, and made this storm no worse than it might have been. So those people need to be recognized first. But of course, I want to focus also on what went poorly. And we know some things are going to take time and study in terms of the resiliency of the community, but some things are going to need to be addressed right away. So I'm coming to you, I hope, with something that you'll see that is worked on immediately. At the Egan Centers in Eugene and Springfield, the victims of the storm came over the days, one after another, just continued to come. They walked in from camps by the river, and they came in from homes that had been damaged by trees. There were people familiar with homelessness, but also people who had never been homeless before. Over time, the situation became more and more untenable and dangerous. We got crowded, supplies dwindled, volunteers that worked 10, 12, 17-hour shifts were exhausted, and we couldn't get new volunteers there. So this was a real danger to life and safety in the making. The leadership of St. Vincent de Paul, as I understand it, made calls. They made calls to emergency services in Eugene, in Springfield, and Lane County. Unfortunately, the victims kept coming, but the outside emergency help never arrived. In Springfield, we came to the point where we needed to close, but we refused to do so, and it's a good thing. I was out there. I saw the ice. I know people would have fallen, broken bones, suffered hypothermia, and stressed our already stressed medical services. All of this happened 2 blocks from City Hall, where the doors were closed and locked. So while some things might take time, I'm here to make a call to action to quickly convene emergency personnel from Lane County, Eugene, and Springfield, and to find out what went wrong, why our calls for help went unanswered. We have 2 months of winter left. This situation could happen again next week. So I'm calling for immediate assessment so that this failure and endangerment of life and safety never happens again. Boom. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next to the podium is Charlotte Helmer, and she will be followed by John Hefner. And you can correct my pronunciation when you get to the podium if I got it wrong. Apologies.
Good morning. My name is Charlotte Helmer. It happens to be my dad. I live in District 2. I'm a volunteer for the Egan Warming Center in Springfield. This is my first time giving a public comment, and I am speaking as an individual, not on behalf of Egan. Egan is a low-barrier ad hoc shelter system that opens on nights when forecasted temperatures are below 30 degrees. I'm shift lead at Egan, That means that I focus on supporting my volunteers so that they have the greatest capacity to serve our guests. I try to uphold our protocols and keep everyone safe. During the ice storm, I saw our volunteers and guests struggling in unsafe conditions. Just halfway through the storm, we were already dangerously understaffed and no one was scheduled to relieve us. The shelter was overcrowded, the toilets were frozen and full, and trash was piling up. We called county emergency management. We called the city emergency managers, LTD, law enforcement, and other public agencies. We called for backup. We really needed people to come staff the shelter immediately, or we needed transportation for our people to some other safe place, and no help came. I thought we were at the end, but my crew of volunteers refused to close the shelter. They turned on me, and I'm really glad they did. They said, even if we hand over the building to our guests and walk away, we cannot close, and they were right. Conditions in the shelter were risking life and safety, but conditions outside were the same. Slick ice, temperatures below 20, nowhere for vulnerable people to go. Following protocols to keep ourselves safe would have been viciously cruel to our guests. So we stayed open for another 31 hours. At times, there were just 4 volunteers and over 140 guests in the building. Law enforcement kept bringing us storm refugees. The power failed. We kept going in the dark. We scrounged up flashlights and propane stoves. We treated wounds and frostbite with towels and trash bags. Volunteers pulled 8, 12, and 16-hour shifts. When Springfield City Hall finally opened, we broke a trail through ice so our people could reach their doors. I understand the purpose of closing services in a storm, of following protocols to protect city and county workers. But this was a true state of emergency. I am appalled and angry that public agencies at every level hid behind their protocols and left people to suffer and risk injury and death. Government leaders heard our calls for help and they gave us nothing. And if they tried to help, it was too little and it came too late. I wish that our community leaders could have been on shift with us during the storm, that someone had grabbed their attention and demanded that they take care of the most vulnerable people. We need an after-action review of how emergency services function and failed. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. John Hefner, followed by Liz Herkus.
Hello, my name is John Helmer, John E. Helmer, also his son. And I'm a resident of District 2. This is my first time giving public comment before this board. I've been a volunteer at the Springfield Egan Warming Center for the past 7 years. During the ice storm, in my view, we were abandoned. Rather than being the first line of defense, our shoestring operation was actually the only life and safety preserving option for a huge portion of the most vulnerable people in our community. For the volunteers, as the ice settled in, it became increasingly clear that our normal schedule of closing the doors at 8 and forcing everybody out was simply untenable. The ice was still well over an inch thick. It would have forced 140 people out onto that ice with nowhere to go, people we have come to know and care about. And so we stayed open, ignoring our instructions, ignoring the basic and reasonable rules that our leadership had set out to keep volunteers safe. At this time, we knew that St. Vinny's staff was working hard to get us relief workers, to keep the lights on, to get us food, and to try and address the overflowing porta potties that we relied on. St. Vinny's staff were doing that, but the city and the county were nowhere to be found. I spent dozens of hours at the Egan Springfield site, and in that time, the only substantive aid we got was from St. Vinny's. What I did see of my government was Springfield Police continuing to drop people off for us to take care of long after our site was supposed to be closed. They were relying on us for the most basic functions of government. I know of one occasion in which a person was released from the hospital at 1 in the morning in the middle of an ice storm, and when they would not leave for safety reasons, they were given the option of going to prison, going to jail, or going to an Egan Warming Center. That was the option. That was the answer that the police were able to provide for them. Let's see. I worry that somebody will see the revolt of the shelter volunteers as a heartwarming story of neighbors coming together. That's not what happened. As far as I'm concerned, local government decided to push people out on the ice and accepted the fact that some of them would die, many of them would be injured. and the people who had to do the pushing simply refused to do that. I personally spent more than 17 hours on Tuesday alone, walking back and forth without a break, helping people wherever I could with no expectation of when I would be relieved. I'm angry, not at the police or at anyone in particular, but at the fact that based off the outcome, it seems that our emergency response simply did not value the lives of these people. But I know that's not what we want. That's not what you want. And there are a lot of people who work very hard to make sure that our emergency response systems work. I speak in these stark terms because I think we must deal with these issues frankly, and I am hoping that we undertake a serious examination of how these systems fell apart and incorporate feedback and information from volunteers and homeless people who are the most vulnerable among us. And if they don't get served by our emergency response, then it simply isn't sufficient. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your public comment. Next is Liz Herks, followed by Fran Munkenbeck.
Good morning. My name is Liz Herkus. I'm one of the morning shift leads at the Springfield Egan Warming Center. I am speaking as an individual of my community, clearly here as part of a group who lives in District 2 in Springfield. On Tuesday, January 16th, we planned on an 11 a.m. closure, but we stayed open until 3 o'clock the next day because we realized that if we closed the doors at 11, that our guests would have zero community support in the still sub-freezing temperatures and atrocious conditions. What I experienced in the Memorial Building on the 16th and 17th was awe-inspiring. We had a tiny crew of some of the most compassionate volunteers hanging on by a thread and working together to keep our doors open outside of protocol to ensure that our guests stayed safe and alive, all 145 of them. We did this without any help from the city of Springfield or Lane County, who in one way or another kept telling Tim Black, the Egan coordinator, that they were unavailable. What was awe-inspiring was also incredibly disheartening. I realized that I live in a community that seemingly does not have a basic plan in place to house and support our most marginalized neighbors during a natural disaster. That the city and the county relied on a tiny crew of volunteers to keep the most vulnerable safe and alive. We had overflowing and frozen porta potties. We were using headlamps when the power was out. We were using a camp stove setup to heat up water and soup. We were at capacity. We were over capacity in the sleeping room, and we kept making more space when law enforcement kept bringing us more people. I know that there are people applauding us for what we pulled off, and it is a shame that we had to do it. Winter is not over, and this will happen again someday. I would like the city and the county to step up now, to be prepared and proactive with a plan so that when it comes down to it again, there's not volunteers in a crisis situation emergency shelter doing the impossible with nothing, waiting hour by hour for the city and the county to offer support and realizing that y'all have nothing to offer. And I would like to know why nothing was offered this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Fran Munkenbeck, followed by David Eigel.
Thank you. My name is Fran Munkenbeck, and I appreciate allowing me to speak at this meeting. As a volunteer at Egan, I saw not only that Egan gave shelter to people who were without a home prior to the ice storm, but people without days of electricity who could not find a hotel available or that they could afford. Some were dropped off by the police as they felt that they were too ill to stay in their home. Some were elderly and frail. I took care of a patient that was 81 at the time, some with babies and children, and the babies and children, Egan managed to find another safe site for them so that they were cared for. The city did not help. Some were quite ill and had to be urgently assessed at Egan. I'm one of the medical leads, and so a lot of times we do first aid, but sometimes we're asked to urgently assess, and I did. Matter of fact, I think on Tuesday I sent 2 in one ambulance to Mackenzie, and one was very ill. We couldn't find a blood pressure, and neither could the paramedics, although this patient was still managing to talk. I was at Springfield site, but heard that at Wheeler there was a public health issue, such as portable toilets were overflowing, and no one could get to the site to clean them adequately. The volunteers at Egan did an incredible job, and they did it as it was the right thing to do. However, I, as a citizen who pays taxes, was shocked that it took till Tuesday afternoon for the governor to call a state of emergency in Lane County so that resources can be released for an emergency operation of what's going on. I, Saturday, volunteered as part of the Medical Reserve Corps at Cottage Grove Community Center and talked to the Red Cross and asked them what it takes for them to start acting. And they said they have to they get told by the Emergency Operations Center. But the Emergency Operations Center doesn't happen until the governor calls a state of emergency. So somehow I want to understand who locally speaks to the government about issues at stake so that they can make a more intelligent and timely decision. I feel the chain of command failed. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next is David Eigel.
I'm David Eigel. I reside in Commissioner Traeger's district. I apologize for not getting in touch with all of you individually, but I will be following up on that. I had other things interfere. Just to give the background of the problem at the Lane County History Museum, which is primarily funded by the county, going back years, Bob Hart had made an appointment with me, and then he contacted me by email only, saying, well, I can't meet with you, because of your views. Subsequently, I joined the Lane County History Society, and at the annual meeting, I raised quite legitimately during the Q&A period electronically because of COVID, the issue of my concern about the treatment of Professor Dunn, and Hart removed me from the meeting. He only did that, he falsified the record of the meeting, which is on YouTube, editing out any portions that relate to the Q&A that I was involved in. Subsequently, the Racing to Change exhibit was put up, and you had the two new directors, including Jennifer Yehu, and they've now, of course, been dismissed. And it's just, as I've documented, it's just a disgrace. County funds have been largely responsible for this, and so I'm going to say that you really need to get involved to see that the past is dealt with, that nothing like this happens again, and moving forward, it's really, you're obligated to see that the public is informed that they've been deceived by this kind of presentation of history. And I'll limit my remarks to that, and I'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment. That is all we have signed up in Harris Hall today. Diana, do we have anyone online wishing to give public comment this morning?
Thank you, Chair Trieger. I do believe we have a few people signed up. At this time, if you have registered for this meeting and wish to give public comment, please raise your virtual hand. I will call on you and unmute your microphone and ask you if you would like to be on camera. I do show two hands raised. Our first speaker will be David Strahan, followed by Keith Baskett. David, I will unmute your microphone. Please let me know if you'd like to be on camera.
Good morning. Camera is fine.
Okay, one moment. Let me change your status, and you will see a button that asks you to unmute your camera in 1 second.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm assuming I can be heard?
You can be heard, but your camera is still not on.
Okay, that's fine. I'm okay with or without camera.
Okay, let me start your timer, and you may begin your public comment. Okay,
Good morning,
you may begin your
Commissioners.
public comment.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is... I'm sorry. This has been a rough week. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I live in East Thurston, one of the areas hardest hit. I'm also a long-term Egan volunteer, site lead, site manager. I run a homeless nonprofit, Rehoming Myself, and I also work for Carry It Forward. I was part every day, overnight, for many hours at the Egan Warming Center. And I can attest to everything that our volunteers have said, and more. There's a lot that's not being said. Obviously, we want to know where our public was, where our representatives were, where the city help was, where the help was for a town of 61,000 people to have a shelter with a 150-person max. Understaffed, low on hygiene, low on food, with no power. When the power went out that last night, it was epic. Our volunteers rallied, our guests rallied, and the older couples that we had in our facility felt safe and warm. Some of those couples still have not returned to their home, and they're in various shelters around this town. I, too, would like a debriefing of what happened, of where the systemic failures were in our shelter system, and why we haven't hardened some of our local schools to have resources available for us 61,000 people when there's only one shelter ran by volunteers that maxes at 150, when properly staffed, with proper sanitation, with power, with food. We have the capability within this community to solve this problem. What we need is the collective will from our leaders. We need our main thoroughfares marked as emergency routes and given priority for clearing. We need key schools and infrastructures like the Bob Kiefer Center available with backup generators, with emergency supplies on hand, with local residents available to start that center's opening. Look forward to more comments and more improvements in our system as both myself and all the volunteers in Eagan, and in fact, all of the citizens come together for a better reaction to the next emergency. We are super fortunate that we didn't happen to have an earthquake or some other natural disaster. Time was on our side. We knew that if we could wait this out, that we would survive. Sadly, through this emergency, some of our residents will not survive. We have yet to know the final count, but we need something better than a cadre of volunteers to solve this problem. We need our county's help. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Keith Baskett. Keith, I will unmute your microphone, and please let me know if you'd like to be on camera. Keith, it looks like you have your microphone. There you go. Would you like to be on camera?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, let me promote you up, and you will need to unmute your camera as soon as you move over. Just 1 second. There you go. You should have an option now to unmute your camera. Your camera's still off.
How's that?
There you go.
There you
Perfect. You may begin your public comment.
Okay, good morning, County. Let me go quickly. I don't have much time. The county land management always seems hostile towards property owners. Why does it have to always be a fight with so much untrust? The joke, say no first, then let them prove otherwise, really isn't all that funny. It's kind of a bad joke. They, employees, aren't listening to us, but special interests and the like. It is out of fear or what? I don't know. It's just not right. And I have to listen to some say they don't even agree, but others have just left the county. ORS statute 174030 says any interpretation must be made in favor of the property rights. Is this currently the case? Of course not. Why not? In a very high percentage of these cases, these employees and disgracefully the hearing officials do not follow this statute at all. The law, they are in direct violation without any accountability. You need to remove these decisions from these biased employees and show property owners, give them some relief before those elected to maintain the law, fairness, and accountability. It is ridiculous that we are the only county operating like this, like it was done on purpose. I'm asking and requesting this board bring back the appeals process that was in place for nearly 50 years. I have heard no good reason to not have this. Isn't a complete bias or a power play from county employees. I think we call this constitutional due process. Unelected employees and paid officials should not be the final say on this. This board needs to have its finger on the pulse of land management to find out what they're doing, and this board appeal process is it. Willing all this unaccountable power, these employees interpret change rules, statutes, etc., only to harm property rights. I think we call it extreme governmental overreach. Sadly to say, this 2 or 3 minutes is my only recourse. Even though I have prevailed with applications and even in court, they always find some obscure interpretation to say no, always telling me that they are protecting the sacred river areas from me. Now I know that that is all BS. They lie, straight out lie. They don't really care. It's all about high-paying jobs and unaccountable power. How pathetically ironic, and I can prove it. Remember, I've come before you and discussed the disgrace underneath the I-5 bridge and the piles of garbage from the homeless and the sewage going directly into the river as they just drive by. They don't seem to do anything. They all know it. I've seen them cycle right by from the county and waved at them, recognize the planners as they've seen them all dumping stuff in the river. And they just turn and look the other way, disgusting hypocrites. I can't say that many of my neighbors on Mackenzie View would say about them out loud. It's pretty bad. These biased hypocrites need to be held accountable and stripped of some of their dictatorial power. We need you. You are what we asked for. Amen.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, we have, I see no more hands raised, so I will return the meeting to you.
Thank you, Diana. Is there anyone else in Harris Hall who wishes to take 3 minutes to speak? Please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and the clock will begin.
My name is John Prophet. I've been here numerous times. I requested in the last couple of weeks to know how many CAs were produced in 2023. I believe that this county has ridiculously more than most. And I also want to know, because I paid $1,500 for the hearing, and even my attorney said the outcome is ridiculous compared to what the evidence was. But I want to know how many times these hearings officials have ruled against Lane County. I'm going to assume it's none. That's everything I have to say today. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else who wishes to speak, I will close public comment. Ordinarily, the next step would be to move into commissioner response to public comment or other remonstrance, but because we have some people here who spoke specifically to what was an extraordinary countywide emergency, prior to the meeting, the vice chair and I discussed with the county administrator that we might ask for him to preface our response, to give a little bit of an overview of the ice storm and the county's response. And I want to preface his remarks, prefacing our remonstrance by saying, first of all, a deep thank you to everyone, paid and unpaid, county and other entities who did respond. This was an extraordinary event. This was a county-wide impact event, and we absolutely will learn a lot from it, have learned a lot, will be doing after actions. And much like we've seen in other large-scale disasters in our county, like the Holiday Farm Fire, this will be a long-term recovery effort. And so this is not the first or the last time we'll be talking about this event, its impacts on particularly the most vulnerable, but all the way up to our entire community and our own workforce. So I'd like to turn it over to the administrator for a moment just to give a few sort of high-level remarks on what our response has been, because we haven't had a public meeting since the emergency session we called to request support from the governor a week ago today. So, Mr. Mokrzycki, if you would take a few minutes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. And as you indicated, Chair, I also want to just recognize the frustration, the emotion, the sense of the call for help is what I heard. I want to let folks know that we hear that. This was a significant weather event. There was and continues to be a lot of work that has happened and will continue to happen in response and recovery to this event, and I'm happy to walk through some of those things. As you indicated, it was largely a county-wide event that impacted numerous communities throughout Lane County. Lane County and various partner agencies all have public agencies, nonprofit organizations, volunteers, state agencies, all have significant roles in responding to emergencies like this. And so for Lane County, it's important, I think, for us to reflect on what did we do, what what went well, what are things that we can learn from, we can listen and hear what could have gone better, and how do we continue to improve as those response and recovery efforts as we move forward. Because each of these events, each of these emergency events and response efforts are opportunities for us to learn and grow. So I want to just start by acknowledging, as you did, Chair, that that we're listening and that we hear the call for help and the desire for a reflection. I think we have a lot of reflection throughout our various communities to analyze and assess what, again, went well and what needs improvement. A few things I'll just walk through in terms of kind of the timeline of response efforts, because I think it is, depending on your perspective and the extent to which different individuals and groups were involved in aspects of response effort, you see what you see and you don't see what you don't see. And so I think it's important to, sort of reflect on those things. We did, for Lane County's part, beginning on about Thursday, January 11th, we began assessing the weather reports and meeting to understand with our leadership and our emergency management to look at the forecast, to begin coordinating our processes going into that weekend. Our Public Works Roads Division and Lane County Sheriff's Office began working to respond through their dispatch processes. Our Health and Human Services Department allocated funds actually that week prior to the event for Egan operations. Additional funds were allocated for Egan operations via St. Vincent de Paul. And then all of their asks for help were to be coordinated through our emergency managers. So that was the sort of the couple days before the event happened. By Saturday, the 13th, the system moved into our area, and we began to receive significantly more freezing precipitation than was forecast. I think that was part of the story here, was that the forecast, and this is a challenge that we have that we need to reflect on, is that the forecasting capabilities within our county are not adequate. And so that's one piece of the system that we need to work at. Our leadership was communicating throughout the day with our emergency management. This was on Saturday the 13th, of course. So I do want folks to know that we had teams, our road crew, our first responders, our search and rescue, sheriff's office, emergency management, all of our leadership in Lane County was meeting throughout that weekend to assess the issues and respond largely to other agencies. Obviously, a lot of what was happening was frozen roads and people being told to stay home. So by Sunday, the 14th, the possibility of another round of freezing rain for Tuesday, for Monday and Tuesday, the 16th, was increasingly prominent in the forecast, and we began to make plans for that work. As well as concerns around utility repairs that were already underway. This is almost easy to forget that there was a lot of utility work that happened on like Saturday and Sunday before that second round, which was really catastrophic, between Monday and Tuesday, which sort of wiped out all of the progress that had been made from the utility standpoint, from the downed trees in the roads. So while our coordination through Sunday, the coordination process was keeping up with the volume of requests, our roads and sheriff's office were continuing to hold their own on the operations side. We knew that sheltering needs would likely be a trigger for our full emergency operations center. We gathered county leadership Monday the 15th to discuss county operations for the upcoming week and to ensure that our leadership had situational awareness of what was happening in the community. Coordination process was continuing to clear all the requests that were coming in to county government from cities and utilities. So there's a lot of coordination that was happening there. I will say that we did, our interim emergency manager did receive, was asked to provide additional support for Egan. I think it was on that Sunday. We freed up additional funds there. There was an ask for volunteer and staffing capacity because of the challenges that we heard from many of the speakers here today. We requested volunteers, and we pushed that out through our COED, our community organizations active in disaster group. The Wheeler Pavilion remained open as an emergency shelter on Tuesday night. It was not ideal, but it was a central and larger site to serve folks given the anticipated closure of the Springfield site. St. Vincent de Paul staff, and we need to call out St. Vincent de Paul and carry it forward, and all of the Egan volunteers that just did incredible work throughout those several days. We did make requests to the state because what happens in these situations, of course, is this was a countywide event. So we were receiving requests from Cottage Grove and Cresswell and Eugene and Springfield. Our hospital systems were requesting a shelter be stood up, which is why the Wheeler Pavilion was opened, was to actually triage individuals that had gone to the emergency room but didn't really need to be at the emergency room. And so we had this situation where the emergency room was being clogged up. And so we needed a place to triage folks. So we opened the Wheeler Pavilion largely, and we had our search and rescue staff that was transporting folks from the hospital to either the shelter at Wheeler or to other destinations. So a lot of that coordination was happening with the hospital systems and with the other rural cities. So we certainly understand a lot of the devastation and challenges faced in Springfield in particular. There also was power out in Cottage Grove and Cresswell and other parts of the county, and requests that were coming in through there. So our systems quickly became overwhelmed, our ability to respond to those needs because of the power, the widespread power outages. We made requests of state agencies, because that's really what happens then is that we have to request from the State Department of Human Services support to be able to staff those emergency shelters. So it just gives you a little bit of a flavor of those. Of course, on Tuesday the 16th, then the board met and declared in an emergency meeting, declared an emergency, made that request. Then to the governor, Chair Trieger requested a gubernatorial declaration, and that came actually that night at 7:32. So the board declared an emergency sometime around a little after 5 p.m. We made that request to the governor's office, and that was responded to very quickly. So a lot of work then continued. We opened up our emergency operations center. Daily calls have been happening at 2 p.m. We call them cooperator calls. And so we have our emergency operations center that's been open for the past week. At the Delta campus, we set up a call center for individuals, a non-emergency call center, so that we could open up, keep the emergency 911 lines for emergency response and have non-emergency calls go through our call center. We've received somewhere in the range of 500 calls to that call center, and those calls have now dropped off, so we're paring back those operations. But a lot of coordination in the last week has happened between the utilities, with the various utilities that we have in Lane County, with the various city governments, with the hospitals, the University of Oregon, and the K-12 school districts and state agencies. And so I can go, there's a lot more to go through, but I know that we don't want to necessarily get into all of this. I think what I particularly heard from the speakers this morning, again, was the call for a review to say, can we reflect on, and, an absolute yes to that. We already have plans for, discussions internally to review, and then obviously we need to pull together what we call a hot wash and after action review with all of our community partners, because there were public agencies, nonprofit agencies, volunteers all involved in this response work, and some of those systems did get overwhelmed. There is some work that we can all do better on as a community and as individual agencies in preparing for certain aspects, as well as funding. One of the ideas that has come forward is actually identifying our Health and Human Services Director made this request, an emergency disaster fund. That where we have flexible resources, because some of what happens in these events, which is why the board declared an emergency, which is why we asked the state to declare an emergency, and it's why we're asking for a federal declaration, so that we can get reimbursed. There's a significant amount of resources that are being spent by various agencies. The more that we can have flexible resources locally that we can use on the spot without having to ask for permission, that we can execute those resources, allocate funds, pay for staffing resources, equipment, facilities, any of those things, the greater ability we will have to respond to some of those needs in the moment. There are a lot of other issues around, obviously, folks not having access because of transportation, inability to just get from place to place, and so people were holed up in their homes, and the inability to get both volunteers and paid staff to these different operations was a real challenge for that period of time. So there's absolutely an opportunity for review, reflection, assessment of what went well and what needs improvement for next time. And I think I'll just say again that appreciate everyone coming today and sharing their testimony, for all of the hard work and the dedication, the sweat and tears put into this work, and we are absolutely committed to reflecting on all of this and working with our community to continue to learn and improve.
Thank you for that. With that, I'll open it up to the board for remonstrance or response to public
Chair, I'm
comment.
sorry, one other
yes.
thing, and I apologize for that, but I did also just want to mention Kate Budd, our Human Services manager, is here with us today, and we will later in the agenda have an update on the All-In program. And so Kate will obviously do a much better job than I do about talking about all of the different things that systems we have in place, plans that we have in place, coordinations efforts that we have in place, and where those things like a emergency disaster fund, or ways in which we can tap into staffing resources and funding resources and sites, and where those other sort of gaps in the system may exist that we need to address. So I just wanted to make that note for folks that are here and able to stay or able to watch that discussion. I think there will be more in-depth discussion about our ongoing shelter and housing work, as well as our emergency response related to just the shelter component. But again, important to remember that our response efforts in Lane County are so vast, and we have such a huge county. There's a lot of response and recovery work that we're called to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Board. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you. Also want to thank everybody that spoke. Clearly, we'll be talking about what happened at some of these sites, and it's disturbing, of course, to hear how Egan, at some sites, it's meant for a certain event, but morphed into a mass care site, basically, and fully unprepared to be available and ready for mass care, which you would normally see in when the Red Cross comes in. They have those kind of capabilities, and they did eventually come in, but it does take time, and it was really hard to get around, right? Of course, I want to thank all the volunteers and echo all staff that really worked long, arduous hours in very tenuous situations to care for people. That certainly was probably never even imagined that an Egan site would turn into a mass care site. But we know now how possible that really is. And we definitely need to prepare better next time to ensure that that doesn't happen, because it's just not set up to provide that kind of service. I did have a chance to visit the EOC at Delta and the call centers while they were happening. I appreciate everybody who was working there. It was very, very active. This event was probably the first actual disaster event that I haven't been in those regular coordinating calls. And I want to thank my fellow commissioners for being able and willing to be there and ready on those calls. A lot's happening, and there's a lot of coordination, as was said, with our staff and various people, just people that called in and agencies throughout. And in the meantime, I called my mayors, my city managers, touching base, seeing if they needed to be connected in some way, if they have a particular ask that for some reason may not be coming through or need a little help with, and was on the phone quite a bit. Recently, I was asked and applied and am now a member of the Emergency Preparedness Advisory Council with the state of Oregon. Yesterday, I just had my third meeting with them, and they're really a newer board with the state as Oregon Emergency Management shifted into its own division. This council was also made at the same time, or so over this past year, with new leadership in emergency management at the state level. I've been getting more engaged and seeing how we could help and convey local issues like ours going through emergencies up to the state level to ensure that voices are being heard, and how we can help support emergency management in their transition to its own entity with all that comes with that. So I'll keep the board informed as I go through those meetings, but that is a good way for Lane County to also be connected with emergency management at the state level. And the last thing I'll say is, emergency managers often say, please be 2 weeks ready. We said that for a long time. It used to be 3 days. And 2 weeks ready is a long time. And culturally, we're not there. After a serious event like what happened last week, after day 3, especially at day 4, people have had it. To be 2 full weeks ready is something you have to prepare for all year long. It can't come the day before a big event occurs, whether it's known or unknown. So I encourage people to consider the steps that you can go through each month to better prepare yourselves. In some cases, you can't always be fully prepared, but you can do your very best in the meantime to be more forward thinking. At the same time, we as your county government will always be doing the same thing, and always trying to support our own emergency management team and help you as residents get the things that you need in order to be prepared for the next event. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Trigger. And first, before I start, my speeches, thank you for asking Mr. Mokrajewski to speak ahead of time, because you were able to cover a lot of the things that I would try to touch on nowhere near as well as you were able to from your personal experience with the entire staff. But from this moment, I'm going to look at you, John Helmer, because you're in the room. And Hope on Wheels, I hope you're listening too. I hope you're still here. But thank you for organizing the number of people that came in this morning. And thank you for allowing us to kind of glimpse a little bit of what it felt like inside of the shelter, inside of the memorial building. I was in touch with Bob a couple of times on one of the mornings and talked with Tim Black and the issues that St. Vincent de Paul had with staffing. We have all, I'm not going to go into details of what happened that day. You know what happened, and you are able to point out in no uncertain terms, and while it is still salient with everyone, how we can do better next time. Because this was only a week long, what if it was still going on even now? So we have to be prepared. We have to use this as an opportunity to learn from how the systems failed, how the systems were inadequate to begin with, and what can we do to shore it up. When I first came to America in 1965, every building had a shelter. I couldn't believe it until I walked around and every building had a shelter, and people were prepared to use those shelters. Now, those were fallout shelters. But they were equipped and people knew what to do in case of that particular emergency. Well, any emergency that's life-threatening, we have to have that same kind of ability to respond. And I think you are helping us to illustrate how we might be able to respond, and thank you for doing that. Thank you to everyone who spoke this morning. I think our work is ahead of us, but we also have a very, very valuable immediate past experience that we can use to educate us and to inform the work that we have ahead of us, Mr. Mokrajewski. I want to thank you for all of your thought, and I want to especially put out a thanks to the staff who worked sometimes at home in darkness, particularly Jeff Kincaid, who I know was running the operations of the emergency response from his own darkened home. Everybody was pulling together. And in a memorial building, we had 125 souls in there needing immediate help. More would have been there. In Lane County, we had 365,000 people from the top of the Three Sisters to Cedar Head Lighthouse, some of which did not have city government to fall back on, many of which only have county government to fall back on. The job's immense, but preparation helps us for the job when it's at hand. Thank you very much.
if you could just send us an email if it's something you want, that you need us to have for good information.
I was a foot soldier.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Commissioner Sennigan.
Yes. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And it was brought up in here, which is exactly what I was thinking. Is what if this was an earthquake? You know, we knew the weather was going to warm up, it was going to melt away, and if we make it through that, we survive. And we had noticed it. We had weather coming. We had no idea it was going to be this intense, of course. But an earthquake doesn't give you notice. So we can do better. In big picture, I want to take a minute and absolutely thank the Lane County staff, though, because Commissioner Buck and I both went down to the call center. They're taking calls because we don't have internet or don't have power or landline's not working, and the people answering these phones don't have power, and they're trying to help people get to where they need to go, and it's really impressive to have that kind of dedicated staff that forge those roads to come home and help the community. So the main EOC was very impressive. The collaboration with the Forest Service and everybody else that comes in to help in an ice event you don't even think about. And they just work amazing as a team. So saying this is, I know we can do better. This was a real indicator of what can happen and what did happen. And I think you have a very dedicated Board of Commissioners here that would like to see this do what we can. Thanks for coming, bringing it up. I really appreciate it, whoever set it up, because we heard about it, we knew, but I didn't know the intensity of it. I really didn't. So thank you for taking the time.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the Commissioner's comments so far have been spot on. Commissioner Buck, I certainly appreciate your comments, too, that you made, reminding each one of us that to be an asset to the community is something that can really help us in a crisis like this, to be a little bit better prepared each individually as you can, I think is a worthwhile cause to help all of us get through this. I keep bringing up my 92-year-old mother-in-law. She may be old enough to where she doesn't really have a backup plan, but I'm her backup plan, and so that backup plan tends to work. I kept her warm in my house as my power was off for a week solid as well. And John, I want to thank you and all your Egan volunteers Monday morning when you encouraged me to come down for a shift at Egan. I got to be firsthand eyes on what was going on within my district and how the dedicated love and care that you have for all your guests. And John Jr., I want to just point out right here, you said that these are people that we know and care about. And I think that really strikes a chord to all of us in the community. We know and care about all the people that we want to help, those that are vulnerable, those that are part of our family, those that are part of, East Thurston that just got wiped out with trees falling everywhere, everybody we care about. And I think to go back to Commissioner Buck's comment about all of us trying to be better prepared, this will help us better care for everybody at every level, including the Egan Warming Center. And again, this was an unprecedented event that I don't know if any one of us could have planned for. Opening up City Hall during that morning, I'm reminded about how iced over those doors were and how long it took to get those doors free, and how the sidewalks were iced over, and how people in wheelchairs, and that one gentleman, John, that you and I talked about, that only had socks on his feet and crutches. And it was terribly heart-wrenching things to happen. But at the same time, there was multiple arenas of the county that needed all hands on deck. Springfield Utility Board had to massage 40% of their power grid within a week to get people back on power. Cottage Grove is still limping along on 2 generators for 2 of their subsystems. There's a lot of damage that was sustained that took a lot of labor and hands-on, and sometimes there just isn't enough butter to go around, and that's something that we need to work on and plan better for. And I'm committed to doing that, as not only for the Egan Warming Center, but for the city of Springfield, to find a place, a permanent place that would have some backup system on its own so that the Egan Center wouldn't be dependent on donated buildings or $1 a month kinds of rental situations where the power went out in downtown Springfield. Nobody could have predicted that. But then if you had a place of your own, perhaps there could have been a backup plan. There's enough roots for you to put down to where your system's in place could help in an over the skis kind of situation like this. And as far as the other things, Keith Basquette and the others that gave testimony, thank you again for that. Land Management Division is working some irons out with that, some crinkles, and all hands are on deck with that as well, and we hear you. And for all of us that are still suffering through this ICE event, I just spoke to a woman in staff today who is 9+ days without power, and she's showering in one of the staff bathrooms here at the Public Safety Building. I want to salute all those people, like I said, the staff that worked at the Emergency Operations Center. That's a military precision run event, and I was super impressed the number of days that we were out there watching those guys orchestrate and get things done in the county that need to get done. So thank you again for that, staff.
Thank you. I'll just wrap us up by first adding my voice to the choir of appreciation to the Egan volunteers. I've been an Egan volunteer over the years, but never in such extraordinary circumstances as you all faced. And really, of course, what we should all be working towards is reducing the need on such a thing in an ongoing way. I mean, this was a disaster for the whole county, but the day-to-day disaster of being unsheltered is why Egan exists. And so our work at the county and with all of our public and private partners to work to reduce those numbers is more important, and this just highlights that need more than ever. As our administrator pointed out, we'll be getting an update later on our ongoing services and solutions approach to trying to drastically reduce the number of folks who are living in everyday disaster conditions. So that's important work, and I'm looking forward to hearing that update. We also have on our calendar later today an update on Holiday Farm fire recovery, and I bring that up because I really think this is going to be a disaster of scale where the recovery effort is going to last far longer than the immediate response time did, because I think we still haven't fully felt the impacts and seen what all is going to be involved in recovery, from the individual level of folks who had surgeries canceled and whose now health will be further compromised as they wait months to get that rescheduled, to the larger systems impacts, like with the critical infrastructure that some of our utilities suffer damage to. So it's a long road ahead of us. The state of emergency declaration that the governor put in place on behalf of Lane County has a 14-day window, and then we'll be regrouping and figuring out what we do to get the resources in place to rebuild and restore Lane County in the wake of this disaster. And I think this all really highlights the importance of everyone understanding their right role and being in that lane, which is different than being siloed. And that's what the Emergency Operations Center does, is it breaks those silos down and creates that coordination and communication across different roles, but it keeps those roles really clear, because that's the kind of discipline that's required in an emergency, so you don't get everybody shifting over to do one thing and 97 things are going undone. We need all 98 things happening, and as Vice Chair said, sometimes there just isn't enough to go around. So we learned a lot of what it looks like to respond to a countywide emergency. We've responded to other emergencies of similar intensity, but never so geographically widespread as this that I'm aware of. And finally, I'll just say, with the 2 weeks ready, I'll just emphasize how important that is, alongside the recognition that not everyone has the resource or ability to be 2 weeks ready. So those of us that do are part of helping ease the strain on the system, which then makes it easier for us to care for those who don't. So we all have a role to play, and just deeply appreciate all the hard work that has been done and is yet to come. So thank you, everyone. It's been a rough week, and I hope you all get some rest and take good care of yourselves. You've been through a lot. Thank you. So we will move on in the agenda, and next is our consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Chair. I'd like to move to approve the consent calendar as presented for January 23rd, 2024.
I'll second. Thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair Lovell, seconded by Commissioner Buck. to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Next up is county administration, and the first item, 6A, is Order 24-01-23-12 in the matter of endorsing the Oak Ridge Safety and Community Response Plan, and our Policy Director, Steve Adams, is with us this morning to present on this brief item.
Chair Trieger, Vice Chair Lovell, thank you so much for the opportunity. Disaster preparedness is a theme this morning. Before this board, is a draft order for your consideration. It comes at the request of the cities of West Fir and the cities of Oak Ridge. This is related to a regulatory request that will ultimately be made to the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality and the Lane Regional Air Pollution Agency to allow an exception in the 1-hour smoke rule. Now, this is important because this is related to fuel reduction through a method called prescribed fire. So this is a method in which firefighters under controlled conditions string fire through parts of the forest to reduce fuel when it can be controlled and when the risk of wildfire is not great, which ultimately produces fire breaks around some of our communities. The city of Oak Ridge and this part of the state in particular is really a statewide leader in Oregon on prescribed fire. The Southern Willamette Forest Collaborative in particular is a model on the west side of the Cascades, really the only one that is working on some of these issues. This is more prominent in eastern Oregon. Other places around the Intermountain West, and certainly back east in the southern United States, prescribed fire is a very common tool that is used specifically to manage for wildfire. It improves habitat quality as well, has multiple benefits. And the science is telling us that the fire return intervals for the western side forests are actually much greater than we had ever anticipated pre-settlement out in this part of the country. So nonetheless, there is a desire to be able to access the regulatory process to enable a waiver to the 1-hour smoke rule as part of an organized smoke safety plan that a community-driven process in the Oak Ridge area has put together. It has been put forward and approved by the cities of West Fir and Oak Ridge, and the controlling OAR requires the county board to sign off on that as well. So, Chair Trieger, that is the content of the order before the board this morning.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions from the board on this item? Then I will look for a motion. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move approval of Order 24-01-23-12 as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Farr to approve Order 24-01-23-12 in the matter of endorsing the Oak Ridge Safety and Community Response Plan. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Next, we have a report, a quarterly update on Holiday Farm fire recovery with Matt McCray, our disaster recovery manager, and I think Steve Adams is going to stay at the table in case there are any. Oh, and a little technical support.
Yeah, thank you,
on the
Chair
way.
Trieger.
Thank you. Good morning.
Vice Chair Lovell, good morning. Thanks for your assistance. I have a short presentation to share with you, just providing a brief update on wildfire recovery efforts, and then I'll shift very quickly to some funding that we're seeking authorization to use for rapid rehousing. Chair, I just want to check in with you on the time. I know this morning's going a little differently than expected. Do you want me to shorten this time frame?
Thank you. If that's possible, this is important work, but we do have quarterly opportunities, so I appreciate your awareness of that. Thank you.
Understood. All right. I'll try and keep my comments brief then. And thank you for the time. The presentation, it will be just less than 10 minutes. So this is the standard list of data points that I have been sharing with you over the past couple of years. So the total number of dwellings that were lost in the Holiday Farm fire is 517, and we're seeing 173 dwellings completed at this point. So about a third of the total dwellings that were lost have been replaced. I do want to point out that at this point, that is largely households that had full insurance and or additional resources to help rebuild. So I would say this slants largely towards folks who have more resources and a higher income. Just as a note, I'm not going to spend a lot of time today talking about the Community Development Block Grant disaster recovery funds that are coming, but there are funds coming through the state through Oregon Housing and Community Services that will hit the ground this year. Enrollment begins in March, as I understand it, and that will provide funding to help households who are under 80% of the area median income to rebuild. So this is the same data points, just in a chart to kind of show you the trend. Like I said, same figures. 253 building permits issued, 173 completed. And then just for additional context, the total number of properties that were affected by the Holiday Farm fire was 600, and we've seen about 32% of those. Sorry, that 19 is not correct. It should be 194. About 32% of those total number of properties that have been sold. And then we do have, as you all are aware, free emergency RV permits for folks who want to live on their property while they're awaiting their building, their home being rebuilt. And that number has fluctuated right around 100 for the past couple of years. So that's fairly consistent, and we're not seeing that number going down. You all opted to waive permit fees for both residential and commercial buildings that were affected by the Holiday Farm fire, and you can see $1.6 million in permit fees waived to date. A couple of highlights of progress. I want to mention for folks who are listening in that we have many more detailed updates within the materials that went to the board. So I'm just going to touch on 5 items, but there's a fair amount more in the written materials available online. We entered into a contract to conduct a retracement survey of Blue River, which was platted in 1906. And so there was a lot of opportunity, a lot of need, because all of the boundary markers had that people commonly used, fences, et cetera, were gone. And so there was an opportunity to just make sure everybody understood where all the boundaries were in what we call downtown Blue River, about 60 properties. And so that retracement survey is now completed. I also want to highlight work also from our Public Works team. 2 wastewater treatment option assessments have been conducted. Rob Woodard is the lead on this. And the initial look was to understand what it would be necessary to create a community-wide wastewater system for all of Blue River, serving 100 lots or so. And it was determined that, at least currently with the information we have right now, given the 3-basin rule that increases the requirements for water quality, any water being put into the ground or into surface waters, that a system like that is just not feasible to serve the entirety of Blue River. So the pivot went to evaluating the opportunity for a couple of smaller wastewater treatment systems, specifically for those lots who can't host a conventional drain field on their property. There are some lots in Blue River, especially commercial properties, where there's just not room for a building and the drain field required to serve, especially a restaurant, for example, or a household on some of those small lots, depending on the size of the household. So there's a recognition that we need some alternative options to conventional septic systems. That assessment has been completed. And we now are in the planning phase for 2 small-scale collective wastewater systems. They would each treat 2,500 gallons per day, which is about 8 households, more or less. So they're much reduced in scope, and that work is being, as I mentioned, led by Rob Woodard. And there's a current effort to engage the community in Blue River to determine what the need is. Make sure that everybody's interested in pursuing this. And the Blue River Water District is taking the lead on community engagement to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community. One more highlight. You all saw this on January 8th on their consent item, and I just want to bring it up. It's an exciting development. We applied for hazard mitigation grant program funding from the federal government in 2022, and we were just notified in September that we are going to get an award for a hazard mitigation project at the school up in Blue River. As you're all aware, it's a fairly sizable campus with a number of buildings. The first phase of this project will be evaluating the structural vulnerabilities within the building. We're looking at a whole host of disasters that we want to help this building survive, including seismic events, wildfire events, snow load, wind events, etc. So we'll have a team of engineers take a look at the deficiencies, structural deficiencies in the building, and make a plan for rebuilding those. And then the next phase, which will bring about $2 million to help actually implement structural retrofits in multiple buildings on campus. We're working in close partnership with, of course, with the school. They're really taking the lead on, what they want to see done. We're just a supporting partner because the school district was unable to apply directly themselves. So we're there to support them in making this happen and excited to see improvements. Another highlight, we were proud to co-host a summit on wildfire recovery at the end of October with the University of Oregon. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I just want to point out we had 200 folks who are working on recovery from state agencies, federal agencies, nonprofits, local governments, all in a room for a couple of days to talk about what's working, what's not working, what do we need to adjust right now. It isn't solely about how do we do the next one better, though of course that's a part of the question, but how can we adjust now so that this recovery can be improved as we go. And lastly, on this item, I just want to touch on where we're going to be focused for this coming year. There are planning, infrastructure, and economic revitalization funds. This is a subset of the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds. The total to be spent for the Holiday Farm fire is $7.9 million, which, given the infrastructure needs and economic recovery needs, is not a lot. We can talk more about that if you're interested. We have assembled a group of stakeholders from upriver who can help prioritize a list of projects. That group has not yet established which projects will go forward, so I don't want to forecast because I just don't know exactly what that group is going to decide. But excited to see some of the projects that come out of that, and some of those I expect, if they don't land with Lane County to implement, we'll be landing with some of our partners, and again, we'll be providing support to help make those projects happen. You're all aware of the wildfire recovery funds we have through an intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Housing and Community Services. My colleague Megan Hurion and I are working to continue to push those dollars and put them to good use. They need to be expended by next June, so we're cognizant of that, and we're going to make sure that every dollar gets expended to support Holiday Farm fire recovery. In fact, those dollars are the very ones that I'm going to be talking about with you at the next item, that $1.3 million request. We're continuing to support the Lazy Days project that Homes for Good is leading on. I do want to call out that the state does not currently have a program to build rental properties that will remain rental properties. The state has devised a program that will provide home ownership opportunities for renters, which is fantastic. But there's not currently a plan to build affordable rental housing in the fire-affected area. There has been a shortage of rental housing in the fire-affected area for a very long time, and this fire just exacerbated that shortage. So while I don't have anything to forecast about what we're doing on that front, we're cognizant of that gap, and we're trying to figure out how we, Lane County, might work with other partners to support the filling of that gap. I mentioned the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, so that's going to be a focus for this next year for sure. And then lastly, we're working with a team from the University of Oregon to review recovery efforts so far and think about what kind of policy adjustments could be made at the county and the state level to make disaster recovery go better in the future, and to make this recovery go better. So, of course, any policy changes would come to you, but this is an opportunity for us to look really closely at, what policies have created impediments to recovery, and what are other communities and other states doing to, what do their policies look like that enable a more successful and rapid recovery. So expect to bring some of that to you in June if all goes well. And lastly, I want to highlight the work of Public Works that continues in water and wastewater. The Blue River Transportation Growth Management Project, looking at the land uses in particular in Blue River, and the road design work being done by the transportation team. That's all I have for this first section. I also do want to make one comment about the winter storm. I spent some time myself in the Emergency Operations Center this weekend, helping to staff that, but also with an eye toward what are the long-term outcomes? What are we going to have to be doing a year from now related to the storm so that we can put systems into place and make sure we have folks responsible for carrying those pieces that are going to last more than the next couple weeks. That is all I have on the update. So, Chair Trieger, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. Turn it to the board for any questions for the staff. Commissioner Buck.
I'll just add that in the funding coming down from the CDBG disaster recovery funding, there has been yet another committee formed for the allocation of those funds. I'm on that committee with Representative Marsh and other fire-affected communities where commissioners are on that board as well. So we will really want feedback from the stakeholder group, the local stakeholder group, since there's no real other formal city government or anything like that. It's really important to me and for them to be heard. This is, in my mind, this money is fire victims' money, and they should be the ones to tell us what they want to have done with it. Thank you, Chair.
Seeing no other comments, I just have a quick question. So we're about a third fully rebuilt. Do you know how that compares to other fire-affected communities? Understanding that it's contextual, but just curious how other counties are doing.
Yeah, my understanding from looking at our neighboring counties is that we're all in about the same arena, recognizing that, as you just said, some communities have infrastructure in urban areas that were affected where it's easier and faster to rebuild. But, for example, Marion County is very similar to Lane County in terms of the jurisdictions. But my understanding is we're, all at about the same pace. It is not the same for sure, but similar neighborhood.
Great. Thanks for the report.
Sure.
And for your help with time management. Appreciate that, too.
Gladly.
So next is item 6C. And before I do that, just for anyone watching, as Mr. McRae mentioned, all the materials we have available to us are available to the public. If you go to the agenda online and click on View Materials, you can see the slides and all the background material that we get as well. So I am looking for a motion for Order 24-01-23-13 in the matter of delegating authority to the County Administrator to execute Mackenzie Valley Long-Term Recovery Group Rapid Rehousing Subgrant Agreement in the amount of $1.3 million.
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
I'll second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Farr. Any questions or discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Approval of Order 24-01-23-13 as presented. Thank you. County Administration announcements.
Chair, I'm happy to. I do have a couple things I want to talk to the board about, but push that to the end because we have Kate Budd here, and I think some folks might be waiting for that. So
that sounds great.
You can wait on me.
Thank you. I'll make a note of that. Then we will move forward on the agenda to Health and Human Services and start with item 7A, Order 24-01-2314 in the matter of approving 10 contracts 5 amendments, and delegating authority to sign the approved actions. And it looks like Director Gray is not with us this morning.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning,
Zach Evans, Finance Manager for Health and Human Services. So I have 10 contracts and 5 amendments for consideration today. Most of the items in the document are actually extensions of the all-in money that Kate will be talking about shortly. We also have a few agreements that are funded by our County Financial Assistance Agreement through the OHA for behavioral health, as well as OHA dollars for additional residential beds for detox and residential services and behavioral health.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, I will call for a motion for Order 24-01-23-15.
Chair, I'd like to move in the matter of Order 2401-23-14 to approve 10 contracts, 5 amendments, and delegating the authority to the county administrator or their designees to sign the approved actions.
Second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Vice Chair Lovell, seconded by Commissioner Buck, to approve Order 24-01-23-15 in the matter of accepting a grant award from, starting over, Order 24-01-23-14 in the matter of approving 10 contracts, 5 amendments, and delegating authority to the county administrator or their designee to sign the approved actions. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Zach. Next, here I am trying to move us along prematurely there. Now, Order 24-01-23-15 in the matter of accepting a grant award from the Health Resources and Services Administration in the amount of $1.5 million for the period September 30, 2023 through September 29, 2026, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute any required award documents. And Zach, you're with us again for this item. Thank you.
Yes. So what this is the $1.5 million in congressionally directed spending that we received for the Stabilization Center. So this would be the formal request to the board to accept that grant.
Great. Any questions for staff? I'll just say it's always nice to see a loop get closed. This was one of the items on our federal policy agenda that our United Front trip talked a lot about in D.C., and so it's great to see this come back to actually show us the money and get the work moving. So I will look for a motion on this item.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion in the matter of accepting a grant award from the Health Resources and Services Administration, the HRSA, in the amount of $1.5 million for the period September 30th, 2023 through September 29th, 2026, and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign any required award documents.
A second? It's been moved by Vice Chair Lovell, seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve Order 24-01-23-15. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. 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 Motion carries 5-0. Order 24-01-23-15 as presented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. And now, we have this item is discussion only, and this is our update from our Human Services Division on Homeless Response System and Community Action Funding. And I think Kate Budd is leading this item with Katina Inman standing by. Thank you for being here. Good morning.
Thank you for having us, Chair and Vice Chair. Appreciate it. So I'd like to start off just by sharing that I absolutely heard the testimony from this morning, and it is devastating to hear that some of our most vulnerable community members were experiencing that reality during this disaster, and that we absolutely have things that we continue to learn about as we check in with our Egan volunteers, with our Egan lead, St. Vincent de Paul, as well as many other nonprofits that very much stepped up to help address many needs for people who are unhoused during this crisis. I'd really like to point out Carry It Forward as well. Early in the storm, storm, both the formal and the informal shelter down in Carry It Forward lost power and had a threat of flooding. And so enormous thanks to Carry It Forward, who helped to open up the Cottage Grove City Hall and invite in those neighbors to be safe and warm. We want to learn from this experience, and I think one of the greatest challenges, and Commissioner Buck had alluded to this in her points earlier, is that the majority of the planning that has been done around severe weather sheltering for people who are unhoused relies on our usual resources, such as the libraries, the community centers being open, LTD buses being able to move people around. And as you know, during this crisis, all of those opportunities closed or ended. And so it really put people who are unhoused in an enormously challenging situation, and those who were supporting people who are unhoused as well in a very challenging situation. Myself and my staff were very much plugged in as to what was going on, beginning on Saturday, and did as much as we possibly could, especially without kind of formal avenues to be able to go as those were being established as the disaster continued. A few things that I'd like to share is thanks to the COAD group, the Community Organizations Active in Disaster. They were called upon early and often as the need for additional volunteers rose. They unfortunately also had the challenge of not being able to leave their home and travel. We also worked closely with 211, who was helping to guide people to the available resources, as well as just to keep up to date as to what was not available in the community. Food for Lane County, who continued to step up and provide food as they could. They continue to do that today with the Emergency Operations Center, and provided significant bottled water during the water boiling notice that occurred in Springfield as well. First Christian Church has had a cold weather stockpile now for over a year, and they were willing to open up during unplanned times to be able to have access to, hot hand warmers, as well as, hats and scarves and all of those needed things. And so enormous appreciation to them. And then to the emergency management staff who, worked to try to facilitate, as much as they could. Propane, for example, was something that they were able to access and provide to St. Vincent de Paul to be able to keep their Dusk to Dawn program open and warming folks. Also, just want to share, there was a all call out for blankets, and really appreciate, again, First Christian Church working to help us access blankets that were in the stockpile, as well as just asking their congregation to be able to provide blankets and provide them to the Egan sites. And so there was much going on, certainly, and much more that was needed. And so as we're having initial conversations, one thing that is very clear is the need to develop a tiered response that does go up to everything being shut down. And so what does it look like to be able to provide sheltering opportunities for folks who are unhoused 24/7 while a crisis is occurring and while we are waiting for local resources, state, federal resources to be able to come in if that is indeed an option. Another challenge that we deal with when we are planning for severe weather is there's very few dollars that are flexible enough to help to invest in severe weather planning. And so one way that the Human Services Division invests in severe weather planning is, of course, contracting with St. Vincent de Paul for Egan, and working with them to pre-plan as greatly as we can to have, volunteers in place for them to be able to work within their cadre of staff. And so the disaster response fund that Administrator Mokrzycki mentioned would be very valuable because it would allow us to invest in plans that we could think about ahead of the disaster and allow our agents to think through, if we have this much money, how might we be able to pay our staff overtime, or how might we be able to arrange for certain entities to be able to bring folks in to deliver our staff if the roads are too poor? How can we pre-plan to pay for porta potty companies to be able to, dump the waste and come on a regular basis when a disaster occurs? And that would be immeasurably helpful so that the costs that are accrued are covered for the agency, as opposed to them having to, be concerned about investing in what they need and not getting reimbursed for those costs. So just again, enormous thanks to St. Vincent de Paul, to all the Egan volunteers to carry it forward, to all our nonprofit partners, and to our community members that welcomed people into their home, provided supports to their neighbors. Big Gaiman Bar downtown opened up their patio for folks who are houseless or anyone else that needed a warm meal and a place to be. And so we're incredibly fortunate to have businesses and neighbors here in Lane County that are open to doing something like that as well. We know that a crisis brings enormous challenges, but it also brings out the best in a community. So thanks to everyone who helps support our neighbors. Anything else you might add?
Oh, I think Kate said that perfectly. I would just add to, as we look at our emergency operations, our emergency support function, 6 Mass Shelter, is one that in this look back of the last week, the need for better regional planning, our coordination with our cities, we saw amazing things happen at the same time. We have learned a lot, and we will do better as we move forward. Looking when everyone could get out of their homes and looking at sheltering needs and looking at our ability to assess need, we opened up the community resource centers. We learned very quickly there was not a need in Eugene, and then we activated in Springfield, and we served over 1,000, had over 1,000 boxes of food out this weekend, another 300 yesterday. We had 700 meals over the weekend, another 300 yesterday. We worked with DHS, and semi-trucks full of firewood were given out in our communities, both in South Lane and Thurston and Springfield. So also looking at how our community has come together. Our Medicaid providers, Trillium and Pacific Source, were on site getting people housed too. So it wasn't quick enough, and we will do better, and we will do better planning. And also, just as Kate said, it's been tremendous to see our community come together and support both our unhoused communities, but also those that were in a situation where their shelter was not viable anymore.
So we also have an update regarding the work being done to support people who are unhoused in our community. If you'd like to share. What we have for you today includes an update regarding the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project grant, which is from HUD. It's a competitive grant that we received a little less than 2 years ago. And Kirsten London, who is our program service coordinator for that grant, will be providing that update. Then we'll move into an update around the all-in efforts, what we achieved in the first year and what we are looking to achieve as we move into year 2. Then we'll provide responses to a question posed by this body regarding where people are coming from when they become unhoused in our community. So we'll share the data that's been collected thus far. Move into Lane County funding through the general fund that helps support people who are are unhoused, which was a question from this body with an interest in looking back at the last 10 years. And then lastly, just to share an update around the point-in-time count that will be happening at the end of this month. So Kirsten, thank you so much for being here. Kirsten has been with us for a little over 2 years at this point and has considerable experience working with youth and young adults in the past, almost 15 years at this point.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project and all of the work that has been accomplished since receiving the funding. Just to provide a little background on my experience in this field, I've spent close to 20 years working with youth and young adults experiencing homelessness here in Lane County in direct care, leadership, and now happily in my role as a program services coordinator working in homeless youth systems improvement. That's quite a mouthful. Just wanted to set up, Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project is also quite a mouthful, so moving forward, I will just refer to it as its acronym, YHDP. It's new funding. It's new to HUD even, with the first round of funding being awarded in 2017. Lane County had applied for all rounds of funding before it was awarded to us in 2021, in the fall of 2021. We received rounds 4 or 5 of funding. Each round of funding has special rules attached to it, just in case you decide to do some Google searching in the middle of the night. Those rules are Appendix A, and those are updated between each rounds of funding. So HUD likes to look at what worked well in a previous round and what didn't work well and make adjustments to ensure that the funding is being used in really great ways. So while no 2 rounds of funding look the same, there's overlap between each round. That funding begins with a planning period that can last up to 2 years. Just to let you all know, Lane County's planning grant for these funds ends officially at next week on January 31st. Our initial award was for just over $3.3 million, and in March of 2022, we received an updated award of over $3.6 million to serve youth and young adults here. YHDP funding operates differently than other funding sources. So traditionally, applicants will respond to a funding announcement that highlights how they intend to accomplish the work. YHDP requires an application that provides, initially there's an overview of the infrastructure already in place in our community, and also asks for an overview of how we will use the funds and that, to build out that infrastructure in our response to youth and young adult homelessness. From there, an intense planning period began. This included multi-day community planning sessions that brought together youth-serving agencies, including child welfare and self-sufficiency departments at Oregon Department of Human Services, local youth advisory groups, and community members to develop the outline of the work to be accomplished. We also were really lucky that we were able to team up with national supports, such as True Colors United, to ensure our efforts had an equity and inclusion lens. Other agencies we teamed up with or national organizations were the National Center for Homeless Education, and we were provided intense technical assistance support through a HUD-authorized agency. Our YHDP efforts fall into 2 categories: a coordinated community plan, which is a 5-year plan that brings together the community in our efforts to end youth homelessness. Some coordinated community plans in other YHDP communities across the United States have 1 goal and 5 action steps. Our coordinated community plan is quite ambitious. We have 6 goals and over 30 action steps to complete. The other category is project-based. So the planning group prioritized the type of projects to fund. In a couple of slides, you'll see an overview of the different types of projects that we've funded here in Lane County. I should say that all the work we do is governed and provided guidance by a YHDP Youth Advisory Council. The council has to sign off on any decisions that we make and provide feedback before we can move them to action steps. The YHDP Executive Committee group is made up of youth and young adults under the age of 25 with lived experience. We recruit that group with local service providers, Oregon Department of Human Services, area schools, and best of all, word of mouth. The YHDP Youth Advisory Council's motto is nothing about us without us. So this group meets bi-weekly and on an as-needed basis. They also attend our monthly YHDP work group meetings, which is a subcommittee of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. The coordinated community plan was approved by our Youth Advisory Council and then moved to the Poverty and Homelessness Board for approval in March of 2022. Lane County then opened up RFP for projects in May of 2022. And excitedly, our Youth Advisory Council members were on that RFP scoring committee. So really we're able to see the whole project through from start to finish, which has been an exciting component of the work that we do. They also were on the scoring committee with county staff. So it was a very great group effort. We did award 4 projects with these funds. In the summer of 2022, we also hosted a coordinated community plan launching event. The community came together once again to prioritize the work lined out in our coordinated community plan, and we made a plan for year 1 moving forward. 3 out of our 4 projects launched in October 2022, the 4th project launching in January of 2023. All right, so this is just a breakdown of our projects that we have funded. There is a mistake, so that Joint Transitional Housing Rapid Rehousing project has actually increased to 60, so we serve 60 households per year with that project. YHDP funds have expanded not only the types of projects offered here in Lane County to youth and young adults, but also expanded the ages and definitions of homelessness that make someone eligible. Historically, HUD funding has been focused on those who meet the chronic definitions of homelessness. YHDP funds have allowed us to include literally homeless, fleeing domestic violence, and at imminent risk of homelessness, which means anybody who's looking at losing their houses, their housing it within the next 2 weeks, and all of their supports have been exhausted. The funding also has increased the age of young adults to be served. Traditionally in this community, young adults have aged out of youth services when they turn 22, but YHDP funds have allowed us to expand that age through the age of 24. The projects break down into the 2 joint housing projects, 1 street outreach and 1 host home project. Both the joint housing projects and host home projects are not only new to agencies, but they're a new project type to us here in Lane County as well. The joint project is a 2-year housing assistant project that really is about youth voice and youth choice. So essentially somebody is referred into that project and they get to decide if they're going to start on transitional housing or on the rapid rehousing side. Those are 2-year programs, but they could be expanded to 4-year programs just depending on what is happening with that individual household and what their needs are. Our host home pilot project allows youth and young adults to stay anywhere from 6 months to 1 year, while households work towards creating a long-term stability plan. Host homes are identified in homes, so it's kind of like foster care in the sense that the agency goes out and recruits for homes that have spare rooms, and then they onboard them and they vet and onboard them. And from there, once a young person is referred to the project, the host home and the young person participate in an interview, your roommate matching there, and to make sure that's a fit before that young person moves into that home. So they are serving 32 additional households through our host home projects per year. And then our outreach efforts have been amazing. So locally, these YHDP funds have increased state access centers from 5 days a week to 7 days a week, open around 12 hours per day. So that means youth and young adults have a place to be, especially when other places are not open, and they have access to 3 meals a day, which has been really, really changing for the population. We've also increased our outreach efforts in both South Lane and Siuslaw areas. And these funds are meant to serve 150 youth and young adults unduplicated from other outreach efforts here in Lane County. As mentioned, they are pilot projects. Agencies had to completely launch with new staff and approaches that took time. We really spent the first year meticulously thinking through all the barriers and challenges and creating solutions to help ensure that these projects launched and launched really well. In year one, all YHDP agencies participated in weekly one-on-one check-ins with county staff, monthly project launch training topics, and we invited in national speakers and trainings as well as local speakers to help ensure that we were encompassing all of what the projects needed to be able to successfully launch. And then, of course, our monthly YHDP work groups focused on the coordinated community plans effort. It was a huge lift, and I very much appreciate the time that the agencies gave to ensure that our efforts were successful. This slide illustrates some support services that the projects focus on. We've seen an increase in better connection to basic needs and skill building, including warm handoffs to education, better connections to non-cash benefits such as SNAP, and increase to income, navigating flex funding through OHP, and much more. We use the monthly YHDP work group meeting to help foster better connections with service providers to ensure that the youth and young adult are able to navigate the systems in place meant to serve them. This is just that breakdown of the different agencies, the names that if you ever talk to any of the agencies, those are what they're called, and the different program types. So those SSOs are new to us. They mean supportive services only, and then the housing projects as well. What they're contracted to serve in a year, and then the outcomes and outputs that they accomplished in that first year. And this is just to provide a housing overview. So the first step to being connected to a housing project is to complete a front door assessment through our coordinated entry process. I do want to take a moment to highlight through our YHDP coordinated community efforts, we've increased our front door assessors to include staff at 15th Night and Lane Community College in the Career Pathways Department. That Career Pathways Department provides students with access to workforce opportunities and can cover some basic and financials needs on a limited basis. 15th Night staff are available to meet youth and young adult across Lane County to ensure connection to that assessment. So that's been a big change for us, is that we have those roving assessors that are able to go meet youth where they're at instead of asking them to come where traditional front door assessments are done. In the summer of 2023, our coordinated entry team added a youth and young adult case conferencing bi-weekly meeting to ensure that service providers across the continuum meet to discuss households on the centralized wait list. This meeting has not only brought together providers who serve youth and young adults, but also to ensure better collaboration between Lane County's youth services and behavioral health teams. And then once enrolled in a project and we've conferenced folks, that case conferencing really helps eliminate barriers that youth and young adults might experience and helps to ensure them that they're able to get housing ready. So this is just a step-by-step process from front door assessment all the way to housing move-in. And while I don't have statistics for you, I can tell you that from the point of front door assessment to moving into house, we've been greatly able to decrease the amount of waiting time that somebody experiences on hold before they can move into a placement, or not a placement, into a house. All right, this is Charlie. Charlie's 22, and he became homeless at the age of 16 when his household experienced medical emergency that left him unable to maintain housing. The family was able to live with various family members, but as I've seen throughout my 20 years, it often becomes easier to have less mouths to feed, and so those older children in the home are asked to leave just to make sure that those limited resources are available for younger kids in the home. So that's when Charlie began to couch surf. He struggled to make it to school every day, so he dropped out. And he had taken the front door assessment, but until the YHDP funding increased the definitions of homelessness, and because he had had less time on the streets, he had never been referred to a project. In August of 2023, he was case conferenced and a referral was made to a housing project. He decided to begin his joint project in transitional housing before moving into a rapid rehousing scattered site apartment in late fall of 2023. So really, really proud of this, of Charlie's story, and I think it really hits on how well we have come together as a community to collaborate and make sure that our young folks are being stably housed. All right. I want to talk to you about our coordinated community plan. So, our coordinated community plan efforts, as mentioned previously, Lane County hosted a launch event for our CCP plan in August of 2022. We spent the better part of 2 days identifying and prioritizing the different action steps and planned out year one. Tasks completed in that first year include elevating youth voice everywhere. We added a voting seat to the Coordinated Entry Subcommittee of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. But this role now is in line with our current YHTP efforts and currently sits also on our YHTP Youth Advisory Council. More youth and young adult voices were throughout project implementation. So we had our projects come and ask us for guidance and insight into their policy and procedures, their program development, asked for our youth to sit on their hiring panels. We actually have one of our YHTP Youth Advisory Councils who was hired by one of our funded projects. So they are woven throughout this process. I've mentioned that they were invited and have participated on not only our YHTP scoring committee, but they've been invited. I've received asks from other divisions in Lane County asking for that youth voice in the scoring as well. And as mentioned, they have to approve of everything, so they continue to guide the work. Something else that we worked really hard on was building out those outreach teams in rural communities. People are much more likely to engage services when they have developed and established relationships with providers. Outreach teams, through consistent engagement, have helped develop relationships with area service providers in Sayusla and South Lane, including school staff, to better engage youth and young adults and to help us locate where they are. And this has helped increase connections to stabilization. Later on, Kate said she's going to talk about our point in time count that's coming up, but we have had a really active youth voice on our youth point in time count, and we have been able to, in our point in time count, to expand who we're surveying to include the definitions of homelessness, and also respond to those expanded ages. So we're surveying people. We have a youth-specific survey, and we'll survey folks through the age of 24 using that. And we're excited to see what those results are. We think that we'll have a better understanding of what is happening here in Lane County. This year's count is on February 1st and 2nd, and we have expanded magnet events into Cottage Grove, Springfield, Eugene, and of course our outreach teams. We did seek to have 2 magnet events in the Sayusla area, but we're unfortunately unable to launch those. But we have plans to capitalize on connections made this year so that we can have them in place next year. And just wanted to shout out that Kaiser gave us some private funding to ensure that we had a way to fund these magnet events. I've already spoken about our projects, but need to mention that the work could not have happened without the increase to our provider pool. We've increased 2 new providers to our youth experiencing homelessness world, with one of those receiving their first ever county funding. I continue to build relationships with providers to ensure that we have a wide breadth of knowledge, service delivery, and expertise around the table at our monthly meetings. And local colleges, I had mentioned Lane Community College becoming a front door assessment site. They've also area colleges have begun to recognize the need for assistance available on campus. So they're as at our table, providing their expertise and their voice in our work groups, and are participating in other ways in our response system to homelessness. All right, this is Molly. So Molly became a teen parent at the age of 19. Originally co-parenting, she lived off and on with family. They, as a family, had some short stints of living in their car. Molly was able to connect to a front door assessor after enrolling at Lane Community College. From there, the household was housed together through a joint transitional housing rapid rehousing project. Recently, Molly and the baby's other parent broke up, but Molly's been able to stay in the apartment with her child and continues to be supported by her housing navigator and career pathways team out at Lane. All right, last but not least, what we're going to look at completing over the next year. So next year looks just as busy as we continue to make improvements to our homeless youth systems. This includes the creation of a youth-specific front door assessment tool. This tool will be geared towards the needs and realities that our youth face in their journey through homelessness. We are excited to vet this tool through not only our own YHDP Youth Advisory Council, but also include area youth advisory councils to ensure that we are getting it right. We have hopes that this tool will be created and implemented in the first quarter of 2024. Amanda Borta and I will spend some time during this next year drafting YHDP written standards to be added to the COC written standards, and those can be found on the Lane County website. We also are working towards the creation of a homeless by name list to allow for the tracking of real-time data and measure our progress to end youth and young adult homelessness. We'll continue to build our networks in rural communities. And last but not least, leverage relationships with our workforce partners to assist youth and young adults with employment. Questions?
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there questions from the board? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. I'm going to be very, very short because I have plenty of opportunity to praise you on your tremendous work that you've done since you came to Lane County 3 years ago now. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Almost 2.
Thank you. And that's one thing that I wanted to mention is that, I first met you, I think, in 2004, 2005, when you first came to Looking Glass, and you and Craig came on right about the same time, right about when I was transitioning from the legislature to Food for Lane County. And it was about 7 or 8 years later that you finally corrected me and said, "Call me by my name. I'm not Kristen. I'm Kirsten."
That's true.
And today you continued in that by correcting your boss and saying, "No, 20 years, not 15 years." And you corrected yourself today. You said, "Oops, Youth Advisory Council." So you corrected using an acronym and actually gave us the words. Congratulations on that little step. But significantly, congratulations on what's made the YHDP successful from its very outset. The initial grant application, was prepared in no small part by lived experience youth. That's why it was successful in receiving the grant in the first place. Every step along the way, every slide you presented to us, you talked about the youth involvement. Nothing about us without us. And there's another statement that you made that I'll cover in just a few minutes. But really, every step along the way, the reason we've had success in this program is in no small part because of your leadership. But your leadership involves youth at every single step of the way. And that the other statement that you said is youth voice and youth choice. That's what it's all about. I'm not going to talk, Chair, about the program itself. We have a great presentation and lots to do because we have received additional funding, and I'm convinced we'll continue to receive funding because of the rare success of this program. But really, what has made it successful, Chair, is the fact that the youth are there every step of the way. We don't do things without them advising. And that's all I will say at this point in time, because there's plenty to cheer about this program. We have lots of time to do that.
Commissioner Buck?
Well, I just want to appreciate the team's work on this. It seems like a slow rollout, but there's so much work along the way to get the program up and running, and was impressed with bringing along another new provider. We've long known all the good work that Looking Glass has done, and being able to expand their services is fantastic. But a family for every child coming along is really great. And it's a different kind of style of serving the community. And the more variety of different options for kids out there, the better. Not one thing is going to work for every single person that needs assistance. So I'm looking forward to seeing some more stories and outcomes in another year. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'll just add my appreciation, and like Commissioner Farr, I'm really love how much the youth are leading and setting the sort of the tone and the culture of this work. And one of the reasons I think that's important, as a former foster parent, for example, so many youth in that system's interaction with government entities or public entities has not always been supportive or listening to them or had them feel like it was there for their advocacy, and they didn't feel like they had agency. And so this is a great way to shift that culture, and hopefully is part of building the pipeline for who's going to be sitting up here in the future and has a different perspective, right? This board has heard me and staff a lot talk about my experience decades ago as a WIC mom, and that's made me a real champion, for example, for that program. And so just thinking about future, I mean, they're leaders now, but future leaders with this perspective, how they're just intricately involved in understanding how public grant dollars like this work, I think is just really high level, bigger picture, so important. So thank you for supporting them in being so engaged in the program in that way. I have just a really functional question. When I look at the chart with the 3 different organizations and the different outcomes, are those all unduplicated numbers, or might there be somebody who moves from support services only into one of the housing programs, and would we see that individual twice in the column? Or
we could. We didn't. We definitely have not in that first year. There is potential, say that somebody starts an outreach, and outreach's job really is to connect them to the YHTP other projects, and so they could then move into a host home project, and then from there move into one of the joint projects for sure. But that did not happen in year 1.
So these are unduplicated?
Unduplicated, yes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Well, great. Thank you. I celebrate with you the successes of these programs and the overall planning effort. It's been exciting to watch and be a part of. So the next step I'd like to provide is around All In. As all of you are aware, on January 10th of 2023, the governor declared an emergency due to the crisis of homelessness. And as a part of that executive order, the community was required to submit a plan as to how they would work to reduce the number of people who are unhoused and unstably housed and may fall into homelessness. And after submitting that plan and receiving approval from the state, we received approximately $18 million to spend within less than a 6-month period of time. So it was a quick turnaround. This is a summary of the dollars that we received, approximately $2.4 million for prevention, and so that's rent assistance and potentially flexible funds to help people be able to remain housed. Oh, thank you. We lost.
I was just signaling they lost the screen on the PowerPoint on the screen.
So we received a total of $18 million, and those funds were split up between 4 focus areas: the prevention, emergency shelter, and so creating new or improving alternative emergency shelters, rehousing, which meant moving someone from an unhoused situation into permanent housing, and then lastly, housing-focused street outreach. And so we worked with approximately 16 different agencies to create, I believe, 26 new programs in the community. And so again, a very quick turnaround for a big lift. And so we had very specific outcomes that we needed to work with for each of those program areas. And after January 10th of this year passed, I'm very pleased to share that 100%, and actually more than 100% of our prevention outcomes were achieved. over 100% of our emergency shelter outcomes were achieved, and 88% of our rehousing outcomes were achieved. And certainly if we were to have guessed from the beginning what would be the most challenging outcome, it would have absolutely been rehousing. What that means is we need to identify housing options for folks who have limited incomes, who may have criminal backgrounds, who may have other barriers to housing. And so it means that there are just very few housing options for folks. And so our agencies worked quickly and in a very targeted way to try to identify housing options for folks, and even utilizing a model called block leasing. And what that is working, and in Lane County, what occurred is an agency worked with an owner of a motel to be able to lease 20 units of that motel for an extended period of time. And those units will be utilized as permanent housing for participants within the Rehousing All-In program. And so that's very exciting. It creates, ready-made units for folks, and then that agency will continue to support the individuals who are residing in those units. And we do hope to continue to expand our use of block leasing because it does create kind of ready-made units available as soon as a household is deemed eligible. So that's exciting. The other key component of the all-in efforts was around system improvements. We have a homeless crisis response system where the different programs that we have work together to help move someone, from the street, maybe into emergency shelter and into permanent housing, or, from the street directly into permanent housing. And there's always ways that we can be doing things better and more efficiently. And so a few things that developed in the last year include an encampment-focused outreach team where there was a housing-focused outreach team that identified specific encampments within the community. And that outreach team, they engaged those individuals and then worked to house them. There was a focus on one encampment in Armitage Park, and I know, we receive feedback from neighbors regarding that camp. And what was really exciting is out of the 20 individuals that had been residing in Armitage Park for years, in some cases, 19 of them are now permanently housed and continue to receive supports from that outreach team. And so it's very exciting. And having spoke recently to one of the residents that had been residing in Armitage Park, they said that they had to move, within a matter of weeks, if not months, on a regular basis for years, and had not been able to be stable even to the point where they could start looking at what was next. And so what's exciting is now that they're in their own home and they know they can stay there, they're able to look at, and this person's particular example was, he had been a trucker in the past and now is looking to get back into trucking so that he can have a regular and stable income. And so it's very exciting, and we had seen some positive results as a result of that encampment effort. We also were able to develop more clear access points for the prevention programs. So we guided all folks through 211 and 50 different referral agencies throughout the community if someone was in need of rent assistance. And that was helpful because previously folks had to call, many different agencies to see if that particular agency had rent assistance. And so now we have a very clear pathway for folks. We also were able to develop a clear pathway for folks within rehousing, which was going through 211 info and working through the Unite Us system, which is a closed loop system of referral. So that was a really positive development. Another exciting development was that a shelter app was developed and now is live on the Lane County website. And that helps both people who are unhoused and those in the community understand what shelters exist in our community and then what may have shelter space, which is very exciting and honestly something that I am just personally excited about, because sharing that information is vital. And you hate to send people on, lengthy efforts to try to find something that may not actually even exist. So this is a great development. And then lastly, a local landlord risk mitigation fund was developed. We early on in these all-in efforts surveyed a number of landlords to understand, what might be a motivator for landlords to work with the all-in providers. And we heard loud and clear that number one, if they took a risk in working with someone, they needed to make sure that any damage or unpaid rent that was left, that their costs were mitigated. And so $20,000 landlord risk mitigation fund has been developed. It is now launched, and landlords do not need to sign up for it ahead of time. They simply just need to connect with our program coordinator should damage occur and they are renting to an all-in participant. So we worked hard to reduce as many, as the landlord shared, hoops to jump through. They were looking to jump through as few as possible, and that's certainly understandable. So we're excited about that development as well. So the other next step is, and I want to share this because I think it is very exciting. These are the outcomes that we achieved for the all-in efforts. And we continue to see these outcomes rise. Actually, if you were to go to our all-in dashboard, this is what was showing on January 10th. Today, as we continue to track, our rehousing efforts are up to 90% at this point. So we'll continue to track the progress of all our different programs. So moving forward, the agencies that had dollars left over from round one of all-in funding will be continuing to spend those dollars through the end of this fiscal year. So the dollars were able to roll over, which is positive because it meant that there was a seamless continuation of the programs that had been developed. In addition, there is a second round of funding that the state has provided to us in the amount of approximately $19 million. And the primary focus of those $19 million is to maintain and sustain the programs and emergency shelter beds that had been built during round one. And so we will continue to have that focus. How we're going to be allocating out these round $2 is very much looking at which programs achieve their outcomes first and foremost. And if there were agencies that struggled, likely they'll be seeing their dollars reduced, if not ended. And we may, because there were some agencies who did struggle mightily with the rehousing efforts, we may open up a request for proposal for new programs that may be interested in providing rapid rehousing in the community. So we're very fortunate to be receiving this 2.0 round of dollars and to be able to continue to work with our amazing providers who move mountains in the first 6 months, and we know will continue to do so with these round $2, which run through this biennium, so June 30 of 2025.
Excuse me, Kate, I have a quick question
Sure.
before you move into the other. With the round two, since you say those dollars are to sustain and maintain the beds that were created or improved in round one, does that mean they're general operating dollars? How are they different? Because to my understanding is the whole point of all in was to not create general operating that creates a cliff. So how are they different, or aren't they? Am I missing something?
So they are general operating, and even during round one, it was funds to be able to create those beds, and then general operating to sustain them through January 10th.
Okay. All right, thank you.
The governor also amended the year-long executive order for another year, and so that remains in place. And it also means then that the multi-agency coordinating group that had been developed will continue, and will continue to have those meetings and work to manage the programs of All In, as well as those larger systemic efforts moving forward. Because of the weather, we weren't able to have a celebration last week, and so I just want to publicly celebrate all the programs that have been involved in All In. They've all done incredible work and did it differently than usual, especially with the time frame and the very clear outcome focus that we had been charged to achieve. So thanks to everyone involved in this work. So I'm going to transition now and share with you data that we have collected over the last 6 months around the question of where are people who are unhoused coming from in our community. And so in July 1st of 2023, we started collecting responses from people who are engaged in programs for people who are unhoused. And the question specifically posed was, where were you living when you lost your housing? And the response options included all of the Lane County jurisdictions specifically, all of the unincorporated communities here in Lane County specifically, and then just a general choice of outside Lane County but in Oregon, another general choice of outside of Oregon, and then lastly, never experienced stable housing. And unfortunately, we did indeed get some folks who responded in that way. So after 6 months of collecting that data, we received responses from approximately 5,400 heads of households. And we did have a few folks where not only the head of household responded, but then the other partner responded, which is why you see over 100% when I share with you the percentages. But it totals 104%. So here is the first breakdown, sharing that about 86% of the respondents indicated that they lost their stable housing within Lane County. Approximately 8% were outside of Lane County in Oregon. 9% were outside Oregon, and then about 0.4% indicated they had not had stable housing. To break that down further, about 74% indicated the Eugene Springfield area. About 12.4% indicated other Lane County jurisdictions outside of Eugene and Springfield. And then 18% outside of Lane County, which would include outside of Oregon. And then even further, this is the breakdown regarding the jurisdictional response. And so the vast majority did indicate the city of Eugene at about 64%, about 10% from Springfield, about 4% with Florence, 2.6% Cottage Grove, and then 1.6% with Oak Ridge. And so I hope you find this interesting. It certainly is valuable for our team to know and to understand. I can share that in my experience, this is aligned with what other communities do see, that the vast majority of folks who are unhoused tend to stay within their region. What I hear from folks time and time again is that, this is their community and this is where their support system is. They, know the resources and they know who, to connect with to be able to get their needs met. We will continue to collect this data and can certainly share with you once we have a year of information, and particularly if the trend changes.
Thank you. Commissioner Buck has a question.
That was actually my question, is if this is an ongoing data point that we'll be collecting. If it's just 1 year, will it be ongoing?
Our plan is for it to be ongoing. All right, so to change direction again, this body had shared an inquiry with the Human Services Division regarding the amount of county general fund as well as one-time American Rescue Plan Act funding over the last 10 years that had supported programs for people who are unhoused or people who are unstably housed within Lane County. And so looking at those two funding sources, we pulled together that information. And here's a chart to show you what we found. In total, there was an approximate $24 million 10-year investment. That included about $13 million over a 10-year period of Lane County General Fund, as well as about $11 million of Lane County American Rescue Plan Act investment. You can see the blue column there indicate the ARP investments, the green general fund. And to break that down a bit further, we looked at the funding that had been provided for each year and dug into how many of those dollars were allocated through contracts to nonprofit or other organizations providing services within Lane County. Then we looked at how many of those funds contributed to coordination and in-house services. And that includes the Homeless Management Information System database, as well as coordinated entry efforts, as well as our work with 211 Info, for example, and other kind of planning efforts to continue to improve and expand the homeless crisis response system. And then lastly, you have administration dollars. And one thing that the Human Services Division is dealing with is that as we start to see our dollars wane, we get to pay indirect dollars based on our overall revenue from 2 years ago. And so as you can imagine, if we look at 2024, our administration costs are pretty significant. And that is because we began to see our overall revenue rise due to the myriad of COVID funds that we were receiving as a result of COVID. And we will continue to see our administrative costs remain high even into the next fiscal year as we start to see, and I should say, as we drastically see our overall revenue be reduced. And so that is a challenge that we'll need to deal with as we go into the next budgeting session. And to dig into our budget challenges a bit more, I just wanted to share with this body that as a result of the American Rescue Plan Act funds waning, both for the dollars that Lane County received directly, as well as the dollars that the federal government provided to the state and then to the the county, we are going to be experiencing a pretty significant reduction in revenue in the next fiscal year. And so what that means is I have an opportunity to chat with all of you in February and gain your advice regarding how we might go about reducing the overall array of programs that we provide to the community. And so I intend, if you're open to it, to meet with each of you individually, just to brief you on our current realities in the next few weeks, and then to meet with this body again toward the end of February. So one more shift, and this is just to share with you the point in time count, will be happening on January 31st of this year. This is an annual event that Lane County does. We have to do it every other year as required by HUD. This is an off year, but we do consider the point in time count to be an important act related to trends that we learn regarding the number of people who are unhoused. For the third year in a row, we received permission from HUD to be able to utilize our by name list. And I actually was speaking to the Portland HUD director, and he was saying, this is where he hopes all communities will go. So appreciate being lifted up in that way. It does allow us to have a more accurate view of the number of people who are unhoused at a one-night period, but is certainly not anywhere near 100% accuracy. It's the trend that is most valuable for us. And so you may hear about many different outreach teams and other community members going out and surveying people who are unhoused. Our main goal with the surveys is to engage with people who may not engage with any other programs within the community. And so we'll be going out to them. So that concludes my presentation. Any questions I can field?
Commissioner Farr?
Vice Chair, Chair Trieger, thank you very much. I will try to not be the first person in the queue every time, but on this I'm going to take 1 or 2 minutes not to talk about the presentation, because there's a wealth of well-presented information in that presentation that we'll take time to digest. Took a long time to get to that. In reverse order, on the point in time count, it's wonderful that we're able to use our accumulated data instead of putting out the tremendous effort that it took to actually go out in the field every January to do it. So bravo on that. And then the main thing I wanted to mention, Chair Trieger, is that in watching this presentation, this wonderful presentation from Kate Budd, you can understand why Governor Kotek herself has repeatedly and very enthusiastically cheered and praised the work of all in Lane County, and specifically the staff of Lane County, for making things happen in coordination with our providers, with our local providers. You've all heard it. You've all heard Governor Kotek talking about all in Lane County, and the reason for that is you've seen evidence of it right here. You can look at the dashboard to see the tremendous results that were achieved. And the question regarding the ongoing nature of the programs. What we did from the beginning, what you did, and I got to watch very closely, but I got to watch, was you tried to make everything that we established sustainable beyond the January 14th drop dead date, so to speak. The fact that things were extended, that allows us to move more things more forward in a similar fashion. Also, I'm going to use the term cull out. That's not really quite the right term, but the programs that weren't working as well will be kind of weaned off of the program, and the programs that were working will be bolstered. Hopefully, Chair, and hopefully we'll find a way to sustain these programs well into the future, well beyond Governor Kotek's emergency allocations, and find ways to make things happen on an ongoing basis. The dashboard that you presented to us is fantastic. Everybody should take time to not just look at it, but to dig deep into all of the information on the dashboard. Who provided the beds? Who provided the front doors, and how they were provided? And the fact that in rapid rehousing we only hit 88%. Wow, I would say we hit 88%. Are you kidding? It's remarkable, particularly in light of the fact that we have over 400 other households that are registered in the program, ready to move forward as soon as we have front doors available. And without going into any greater detail, I'll turn it over to the rest of the board to talk on the presentation. you and the staff and I get to talk pretty frequently. In fact, I think you probably are sick of me knocking on your door. But the fact is, it really is wonderful to watch this happen. And I will state this to you, looking directly in your eyes, in my years of elective service, I don't recall any program that's ever been as effective as the way All in Lane County has been effective. So bravo.
Okay. Commissioner Buck?
Thank you, Chair. I'm so sorry that you weren't able to celebrate your successes last week. And hopefully that can still happen because all the providers really deserve it. They did so much good work, and hopefully there's a way that we can reschedule or celebrate their work in our community. I've had the pleasure with Commissioner Farr to attend the monthly All-In meetings over the past year, and I've learned a lot. I am absolutely hands down impressed with all the extended data analytics provided and created by your department throughout this process. I think that's just been leaps and bounds of growth and information to the community that we kind of knew was out there, but we just didn't have the actual hands-on data to say, okay, these are the facts, this is the data we're getting, so the community is aware of who the providers are, how many are available, who's from which jurisdiction, who are we serving, which location are we serving. It gives me a great deal of information about, how we want to eventually allocate funding for where the people are that we're serving. Understanding that, people move within Lane County, and where they go and transfer for services is important to us. And the last thing I really wanted to add is, I think, a shared concern with the department over getting funding for new programs and being able to actually dedicate them to successful programs after a year of review. But the existing good programs aren't seeing ongoing funding. And that is a big challenge. You don't want to swap a successful program necessarily or unnecessarily in this case. And you've been able to convey that to the governor, I believe, when she came down to visit. I think that was really good for her and her staff to hear, and I can't imagine we're the only ones saying that. But as you alluded to in the last slide, we're going to have to be actually reviewing some really good programs, and they're likely going to get some cuts, which is tragic when you see another bucket of money come in. And although they are good programs too, those are going to be really tough calls. And so that's forthcoming in the next budget cycle. Thank you, Chair.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm right on the top of your comments about that challenge ahead and just the brilliance that you've all navigated these waters with creativity. But the nugget I took away from this was that objectivity of saying, okay, what really works on the second round, what really doesn't, and being courageous enough to make those hard decisions and continuing to put those numbers up on the board that are plus 100% and now 90% and those kinds of things. That takes that takes some intestinal fortitude, as they say, in the light way. And I appreciate the fact that you not only are compassionate about what you do, but you're also practical. And I think that's what the public really needs, that I took away from there, that the public should take away, that these are not dollars that are being wasted. These are dollars that are being thoughtfully, creatively, and objectively put into place for the good of the county. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, then I will just close this out with one question for you and then a request of my colleagues. How are you sharing out that really important data that answers the question, are people flocking here because the services are so great, or were people already here and now we're finally providing them services? What was the source of folks who are unhoused and unsheltered. Is that getting shared? How are you sharing that around your networks, other providers, and our local government partners?
Great question. Thank you. So you are the first to hear this information. And our plan next is to begin sharing through the regular meetings that we have, as well as there will be a press release going out regarding the point in time count. And it felt like that would likely be a good opportunity to also share this information too. And so you should see something coming out in the next week or so.
Great, thank you. And then just encouraging my colleagues to share that, because that is significant. 86% of people accessing services for unhoused folks in Lane County are from Lane County, and an additional 8.2 are outside Lane County but from Oregon. And I think we all know that folds into broader conversations that we're going to be hearing as the legislative session convenes around Measure 110 reforms and what's happening here in Oregon, and is it unique in the country or not, or what are those inputs. So that is just, this is really important data to set the right context for the conversations we need to have about who is being served and whose money is being spent and so on. So thank you for that, and just encourage all of us to be part of sharing these findings with our networks. And then the only other thing in advance of the briefing that we'll have, and then when you bring this issue to the board of resource constraints and challenges, is I think it would be also good for us to hear other ways in which we're supporting our network of providers outside of direct dollars. I know we've been doing some systems improvements of our own that then help them with building capacity, improving their systems, technical assistance, and advising to organizations to make them more ready and able to manage dollars when they come available, that there's more that we do and can provide to the network of human service providers in the area, in addition to or beyond dollars. That's all I have.
Great.
Anything
Thank you.
else from staff? Yeah.
No, just appreciate your time and interest, and please let me know if any of this information can be provided to you in a different way to be able to share out. We're happy to do that.
Thank you.
I don't do this.
Great. Well, it looks like with the help of our staff, we made up a little bit of time, and so I will look to the board to see if there is any other business. And if not, I think we do have time for county administrator announcements this morning after all, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I have two items, Chair and Commissioners. One is an update and another is a request for some feedback. First, just an update on the Public Safety Funding Task Force work. I think, as you all know, we sort of lost last week due to the emergency response and recovery work. I think I'd reported to you previously that we had one individual. I had made 6 appointments, and then one of the individuals had to drop out because of another commitment, and so we actually went out, opened it up again for another week or so. We received 2 additional applications. And we're reviewing those. My goal is to finalize that final appointment by the end of this week. So I'll meet with our team internally, the Sheriff DA, HHS Director, and Community Justice Director, and finalize that. The other thing that we're doing is finalizing a request for quotes. This is for facilitation services for the Public Safety Funding Task Force. We have not released this yet, but that's the other thing. I'll have a meeting with our internal team to talk through both the final appointment and the request for quote that we will put out. I'd like to be able to do that by Friday or Monday, and we'll probably have that open for a couple weeks, and that is to solicit any individuals that would like to submit their qualifications and a quote for providing facilitation services. Again, I've used the example of in the Parks Funding Task Force work, we hired Bob Kiefer, who is the retired director of Willamette Lane, to help facilitate that process. So someone who had deep knowledge in the parks and recreation systems locally, and had left and retired, and so was able to come back and provide really great work there. So we're looking for someone to do that type of work to facilitate the task force. So we'll share that with all of you, because I know all of you were really helpful in getting the word out around task force applications. And likewise, if you know folks in the community that are interested, available, capable to be able to provide those types of services, we'd like to take a look at that. So that's the goal. Still, my goal is to have the first meeting of that task force in February, and that's. I think I'm cautiously optimistic about that. If we can get someone, a facilitator on board, then we can get a kickoff meeting in February. Any questions on the Public Safety Funding Task Force? Then the other thing, I'll give a little overview here, and I'd just like to open it up to commissioners for some feedback. This is related to the multi-use facility at the Lane Events Center project. I was contacted by the Eugene City Manager notifying us that the Eugene City Council had a discussion. I'm not sure exactly the date. It was several weeks ago. A discussion of the multi-use stadium project, and I think what I'll do is just read the specific action that the City Council took to direct the City Manager, and there's a request for additional information from the county. And so I just wanted to have that conversation with the board here, let you know about that request, let you know that I'm planning to respond to it, but wanted to just sort of get any feedback and guidance from the board in that process. So Councilor Groves seconded, Councilor Groves motioned, and a second by Councilor Keating. This Eugene City Council moved to direct the City Manager to draft a capital bond referral resolution for the council to consider as soon as possible after the city receives notification from Lane County that the county has committed funds for the construction of the multi-use stadium project. That's one. Two, that there's a definitive plan to fill the current funding gap. That's two. And three, that there's a guarantee or plan for the stadium operations and maintenance that does not rely on city resources. The City of Eugene has a couple of slots that they're holding for that in January and February in anticipation of receiving information from the county on it. I just wanted to clarify that I received clarification from the City Manager that they're working on drafting the bond referral resolution, but they will not actually bring that back to the council for action unless and until they're notified by the county of those three things that they asked about. So I wanted to just, you know, there's some of the language I think is open to some interpretation in my mind, but it does ask these three things: that the city received notification from Lane County that the county has committed funds for the construction of the multi-use stadium, that there is a definitive plan to fill current funding gap, and a guarantee, and three, a guarantee that the stadium operations and maintenance that does not rely on any city resources. I think the third question is pretty straightforward. That hasn't been a discussion that we've had. The second question, to kind of back into these, the second question, you know, there is a plan. We know, the board knows that when you met last on this, there's a gap of over $40 million, I believe the number was, and so we were waiting for indication that the state legislature had allocated additional resources, that the City of Eugene was going to be able to allocate resources, and that the Eugene Emeralds was going to be able to raise additional private dollars to fill that gap. So the plan, as it were, is to seek state funding, to seek city funding, and to seek additional private sector funding. And then the first question that's asked is the commitment of funds. Of course, Lane County has been involved in this project for several years, has allocated several hundred thousands of dollars for all the work that's been done to date. A lot of staff, so there's been a lot of commitment, a lot of resources that have been committed and spent on this work to date. The question, of course, is the specific dollar amount commitment from the county, which my sense has been the board has not really been in a position to make that decision because of all these other gaps that exist around state funding and city funding and private sector funding. So that was the last request that the board had asked was, you know, when those other pieces fall into place, then come back and let us know, and we can consider what the county commitment is. Otherwise, you're sort of playing a guessing game about, well, how much money needs to be needs to be allocated in order to fill that gap, because we don't know what the state or the city or the private funding will look like. So that is all to say that that's kind of my assessment of where, of the discussions that we've had with the board and the work that has happened to date. But I wanted to seek your thoughts, feedback, guidance on that response to the city.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll probably lead this off. My comments may come across as a bit harsh, but I think this is one of those things that the city is putting upon the county that may be putting the cart before the horse a little bit. There's a lot of moving parts. You described, Mr. Mokraski, to this thing. There's a lot of funding gaps that we don't know about. And I think to put the county on notice for the city to do something when the city could independently decide to do whatever the city could do. Let's have the city bring forth their best fourth effort to the table. Let's have the county bring forth whatever we decide is our best fourth effort and see where the gap is and see how we are. I think to hinge their decision on what they're going to bring based on what we're going to do, I'm not really a fan of that. So that's about the best way I can put it. That's my thoughts.
Mr. Seneca.
Yeah, I share, a very similar thought. I don't know if a business plan is to go to somebody asking for gap funding, not knowing what the gap funding is. I mean, that puts you in a tough position. So yeah, at this moment, I don't really understand their question if we don't have a dollar amount yet.
Commissioner Buck?
Thank you, Chair. Where we left it last fall was we really needed the M's to come back with a full plan and be able to fill the hole in their funding before we were willing to move forward or consider moving forward. And I'm still in that place. I'm not in a position where I think it's good procedure for the county to move forward and commit money prior to them realizing that gap and determining where the rest of the funding is. It's very chicken and the egg situation. And I'm personally not willing to commit the county to the funding prior to them determining all the other funding as we previously stated in the fall. And even if we were to go down that route, the timing for us to consider this doesn't really fall in line very well with them putting something on the ballot in May. I think there would be a lot more to flesh out and several meetings to do that, and their timeline to put something on the ballot is shorter than what we could even practically do should we be willing. But I'm feeling from this board that that's not the direction we want to go.
Mr. Farr.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to add anything new, Steve. You kind of heard what my sentiments are. A couple of things I will point out is that I hope everybody would agree with me that it would be imprudent for us to take any further steps than we've already taken. We've identified potential sources, and really a part of it is all of us, every one of us, I believe, is amassing new information, and the new information seems to come almost daily. New opinions, new information regarding what the public expects, and I think what they expect, and what I hope they expect, is that the county would not go forward with an iffy proposal or an iffy proposition and committing funds in entirety. So I think, Ms. Mokraski, you've heard from 4/5 of the board so far that your analysis is correct. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll just wrap by saying agree with your framing. I'm not sure we really know what the gap is at this point or what it's based on, because it's been a while since we've seen. This has all been very sort of back of the napkin, and particularly once we heard about the shift to the impact on the campus and other buildings. That's sort of an X factor we haven't really done a deep dive into. And everything has been about capital. Is there the upfront money? But that operating piece for the longer term operations is still a big question mark. And all that leads me to, as my colleagues have said, do we have enough information to make a commitment that that increase in the TLT is the only amount fully within our control, and what percentage of that, if any, gets allocated? I would hate for us to be hasty in designating an amount and then having that be off to the plus or the minus for that matter. So I think that is just too important of a piece that we hold for us to be premature in committing it.
That's all I have.
All right. Well, then, I think that concludes our morning's business. I will just note to the board, we have 2 public hearings starting promptly at 1:30. Then we'll take a short recess to reconvene in the conference room for a work session. But for now, with that, I will recess us until 1:30 and see you all here then.